When I was Rotary Club came to my school and gave my whole class dictionaries and thesauruses. Years later, when I began attending my club's weekly meetings, the dictionary project was brought up, as I'm sure all of you guys know about. I went home later that night and I realized that the dictionary that was on my bookshelf was that same dictionary that Rotary gave me all of those years ago. Rotary is not just a subscription service where you sign away money every month to some people who you'll never meet across the sea. Along with all of the incredible work we do all around the world, we're also in our own backyards, handing out coats in the winter and encouraging third graders to read. Don't even get me started on the incredible service that the exchange program provides. So I've been trying to go on exchange for 3 years now. And thanks to COVID, I've had the rug pulled out from under me twice. It sucks, but this entire time I've had incredible Rotarians pushing me towards my goals and supporting me in my dreams. The overwhelming kindness and support that Rotary has shown me has changed my life on its own. Not to mention the fact that you guys are going to be sending me to live in Chile for an entire year. And I cannot thank you enough for that. All right, one last little story. So at the bottle drop, there's a man named Tony. And for the longest time, Tony had only ever said one word to me. He had said his name. And that's not that big of a deal. I mean, if you talk to me, I'll talk to you, right? So one day Tony was at the window and I was given my little spiel that I give to everybody. 50 cans here, plastic here, 50 cans in the box, yada, yada, yada. You get the idea, right? And in that moment, I realized why Tony had never said a word to me. It's because he didn't speak English. And me, being a fluent Spanish speaker, I said 2 words to him. I asked, ¿Hablas español? And with that, the floodgates opened and Tony told me about his life. So Tony was a bricklayer when he lived in Mexico. And he, like many others, migrated to the United States for the incredible opportunities that this country provides. 15 years later, Tony spends his days collecting cans and bottles off the side of the road to bring to me to collect his $14.40. In that moment, I realized how 2 simple words, an act that can barely be considered a service, helped to change that man's life. Service isn't easy. It's often thankless. Working at the bottle drop is stressful. It can be tough. I often need a change of clothes once I'm done because I end up smelling like old beer. But even with that, I understand the impact that it has on the lives of the homeless, and I'm ready to serve. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Lori. Brandon, do you want to introduce your guest?
Yes. Everybody, please help me welcome once again Deborah Funches. She is a jewelry designer, and be nice to her for a couple more weeks. She's actually put an application in for the club, so be on your best behavior.
They need to be honest after, right?
Hey, Vernon, we're glad to see you back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And Carl Cook, welcome back.
Thank you.
And Chris, do you want to introduce our speaker now?
Sure. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Chris.
We have the pleasure of finding out what COVID has done in grade schools for the past 2 years. Kaveh is the principal at BEH, and he's going to enlighten us on that and, you know, possible things that COVID maybe has caused or will cause in the future as far as education goes. So with that, Kaveh.
Thank you, everybody. I was asked to come up and just kind of share what some of the challenges have been at Boise-Elliott Humboldt over this past couple of years, COVID related and then somewhat tangentially related to COVID. And then also discuss kind of what we see moving forward and maybe what opportunities we have to try and hopefully close the gap on what some of what was created over that time. So first, I mean, I think the past couple of years has been, every year has been a new challenge, and you don't know when you walk in every day what is going to face you that day. As far as what's going on, I would say in the beginning when we started, it was the virtual challenge of like, how do we actually get access to students when they can't come into a building? And then I think that one was we could have predicted that pretty easily. I think most people did. The challenge when we came back was then, who's gonna come back? How do we recapture some of those students? How do we also then close the gap on all the time that was missed while they were away? And I think the thing that was interesting in that learning, because when we came back, it was a kind of a staggered return. We had the end of the last school year, the 2021 school year, where we came back with portions of our class for half days. And then you also didn't capture a lot of those students. We had very small numbers of that actually came back because of the fact that a half day doesn't work for most families, especially working families that need full day care for their children. And so we saw I would say a very different population come back during that end of the year last school year. This school year, I was very excited to see that we stayed in person for the entire year, which was amazing, and got a lot of our students back. I would say the challenge has been just not just attendance of students, which was really challenging. We've had multiple students. I was just talking with our secretaries today, because right now finally our teachers are kind of starting their summer break or starting trainings right now, but about multiple families where over the course of the year, I would guess seat time, they had a total of 5 school days in the entire school year. And no matter what we do in trying to reach out is such a challenge to get them to actually be able to. And the reality we have to look at, and I think this is the hard part about attendance, is that elementary school is not motivating the child. They're not the ones getting themselves to school every day. It's motivating or creating, and sometimes not motivating, that's not the right word. Sometimes it's creating the resources for families to be able to get their child to school. And in case you don't kind of know a little bit about our school, we are a neighborhood school, not very far from here. But at the same time, we're a school that is also a community school, particularly for our Black families that got pushed out of the neighborhood, that you were redlined into the neighborhood decades ago, right? And as they got pushed out, those families have continued to want to attend there for a place that still feels like a community and a hub as they got spread around Portland. So there are extra hurdles in attendance, which I think got exacerbated when we had that break and some of the resources that were there disappeared, or some of the community context disappeared. I think COVID pushed everybody into these silos, and then it kind of broke down some of the supports that were in place previously that were created at home, right? Created between families. And then as you were told not to go be with other people outside of your family, all of a sudden it kind of eroded those connections. As we've come back though, it's also been really interesting to see the multiple grade levels that really struggled on how do we interact with each other in person? How do I handle that, and how do I navigate the behavior side of things? So we already knew the academic. I think the part that was really challenging was how do we build the school skills and the ability to maintain within a classroom for an entire school day. And that we particularly saw that at the first grade, right? Because they really missed kindergarten and often didn't have pre-K experiences when they came in. So I think those were a lot of the biggest challenges coming back for students and families. And then additionally, a part that created a challenge was staff outages. There was a whole lot of staff outages this past year. We had multiple teachers on leaves for huge chunks of the year or for the entire year. And then there were no subs. Like nobody was able to come fill the gaps. And so me, my assistant principal, our instructional coaches, the people that were supposed to be there to support the system were all plugged into classrooms so that we could keep the system running. And so I think that added now to a layer of academic gap that we need to figure out how to close. So I think those are the biggest challenges that we faced coming out of COVID. I think hopefully as we continue to progress, we're going to have a summer program running this summer. We're going to continue to think through how do we take the next steps this coming year. But one of the things we really tried to stay focused on at BEH is how do we not just stay in this reactionary mode? So one of the most frustrating things was everything that we were getting from the district level was like, just what are you going to do today? How are we going to solve this problem? Rather than how are we going to plan for what our next steps are? So what we really tried to do was stay focused on how do we build, even though we might be in a crisis moment, how do we build the next steps to be prepared for taking a forward step into next year. And as I was talking with Chris on the last year, I think if you look at our academic data, in particular at our school, it does not look great, and it hasn't looked great even before pandemic. So this didn't help it, right? But at the same time, it's trying to figure out what our school is tasked with is what everyone should be tasked with, is how do we actually effectively teach particularly our Black and Brown students in a way that is effective and meets them where they are. Because the reality is, when you look at our numbers and break it down by demographics, our teachers are getting better results with their white students than most of the schools in Portland. It's just at our school, we have about 20% white students, where most schools have 70% or more. And as a result, then it makes our school look like our teachers are struggling more than what they really are. But the reality is, and like I was sharing with Chris, it's a different conversation depending on the audience you talk with, right? For my teachers, the pressure still is on the fact that we need to turn it around and we need to be the leaders of how do we shift this, not just district-wide, really is state and nationally. How do we do that? Because this is an ongoing challenge. And so I think as we look into next steps, what we're really trying to do is think about how do we create more opportunities for project-based learning? How do we get more opportunities for bringing in understanding the connections between elementary school to middle school to high school to college and career? How do we have students start learning that at an early age and have exposure to that? Because one of the biggest things is we notice is engagement is the key, right? And if we don't have students engaged in classrooms and we don't have students excited about what they're doing and seeing the purpose of it, they don't care what you're saying. They're not going to sit in that classroom and be a part of that conversation unless they see a connection to themselves. And so I think that's one of the big things we're trying to think through and push through is like, how do we connect these pieces moving forward? At our school, we shifted to a departmentalized approach too. And so we shifted to where we have, and we did it even through this year when people were saying don't mix groups and things, was we have teachers teaching at 1st through 5th grade. There's a math teacher for every single kid at that grade level, so that we can also have that math teacher get the most professional development, have the most time to plan for that and be able to do that in a deep way versus having to learn every single subject. So then there's a math teacher, there's a reading teacher, then there's a teacher that's focusing on the like social studies, science, those pieces that then kind of blend together. So I think those are the pieces we're looking at as we step forward. When I think about where are the opportunities for partnership between the Rotary and schools, I think some of that is thinking about how do we build connections into and more robust after school opportunities for our students, because I think that's an opportunity where they've been cutting more and more, we've noticed, or at least the funding is just not there as much for our SUN programs, which is where we try and get often our kids that need that extra scoop. But then the reality is, how do we not just get like teachers and people in there for those programs, but also how do we fund more exciting and more connected programs to what happens within the school day? Right? How do we create those opportunities and then create that potentially even expanding that schedule? Because that's a piece that allows families to also be able to have their children at school and have something that they're engaged in that's positive after school. One of the things that I don't think is connected to COVID, but is driving me insane, is the connection to technology for young students and unmonitored technology. Like our kids are constantly on chats in groups on TikTok and all these other things, starting in 1st grade. And having phones that aren't monitored. But the reality that I think we don't think about sometimes is when you're a family that the parents are working and they don't have as much childcare, it is something that keeps a kid engaged so that you can get what you need to get done within your life, right? But the reality is it's not understanding how do we limit that, how do we create that? And so some of that is creating opportunities and hours of time for students to be engaged in something else, so that then that doesn't have to be the fallback. So I think that's the piece that I start thinking about, and like some of that is, and I know there's a lot of it that got kind of dismantled in these past couple of years, but like talking through getting a gardening program going at our school. We have gardens, we were able to start some of that with some partnerships we've had of building some new garden beds, getting some things rolling and starting a garden program that would happen in the after school program, but then would be seen and benefited from all of the school, right? And thinking through, we're working with our district finally on pushing through, trying to get a dance program going at our school. The Jefferson Dancers, and many of you, if you've lived in Portland, know that the Jefferson Dancers is an amazing program that is, I don't know a lot of places that have a dance program that's as amazing as that in their high schools. But what has happened over the years is, if you notice, the Jefferson Dancers has got more and more white and affluent because you can afford dance classes at earlier ages. So what I'm trying to do is how do we bring dance to our kids at our school, both during school and after school, and create a space for that? So if you've been to our school, there's a giant brick building, I think cinder block building in the back of the school that I'm trying to work with. We had an architect out today trying to get a look and give me an actual quote on what does it take to get this done. For me, I feel like I could put some laminate on the bottom of there, put up some mirrors and put up a rail, we'd be good to go. The city doesn't agree on that. So it's figuring out how do we push through projects like that create opportunities for our kids that then have them see themselves in a path that's going to take them someplace, right? When we have Jefferson Dancers come and perform at our school, my kids notice. There's one black kid up there. Did you see them? They're right there. And it used to be that was a very diverse group. And so what we want to do is create those opportunities for our kids and kind of build for that. And so for me, I guess I stand here not knowing exactly and not wanting to also give an exact path on it, but wanting to put out some of the ideas and the creativity that we are trying to work through as we think about partnerships. And I also want to say I appreciate so much. I was telling Chris I meant to bring our 3 recipients of the Rotary, we call it the Rotary Citizenship Award for 5th grade. And I don't know if all of you knew that, but essentially we have 3 students this year that we recognized for being amazing citizens within our community when we do our 5th grade promotion. And they get a certificate that says that, the Rotary Citizenship Award. And I go up and kind of acknowledge that handout. And they took a picture for all of you together, the 3 of them, and had written some thank you notes, but then I left them in my mailboxes. I wanted to talk with Chris, so I'll grab those. But I know that you all have partnered with us so much over these past few years and through such a tough time, and I appreciate that. And I look forward to thinking collaboratively about how we can continue to kind of grow and build that community. And if people have questions, let me know if you have thoughts or ideas too. But yeah,
What can you do to combat?
I can repeat it too.
What can you do to combat or turn around the impersonal conversation that individual students have with this rather than with each other?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the biggest things we're trying to think through is, first, how do we utilize technology in a way that is going to create more community rather than isolation, right? So like as an example, we have a music teacher who is so creative that is able to kind of bring in some technology into the classroom, but in a way that is like sharing. And so like he has programs, he actually created a recording studio within his music room where the kids can come in on their free times and come in and use some of the pieces to create, but then share it on what he's trying to launch into is actually having a BEH radio station. But then where the kids can tune in and hear each other and put that into a positive way. I think the reality is, I think for a long time I've been trying to combat it, but the reality is it's not going away. So for me, it's how do I educate and have it be more of a positive platform? And how do we build that as someplace where we're building each other up as a community rather than tearing each other down, right? So I think it's some of it is education on how do we do that, and then opening up eyes on how we can do that in a more positive way. And then some of it is educating parents on how they can limit some of the usage and what's available, and as far as tools for limiting that and monitoring some of that. I had a 1st grader come into my office on one of the last days of school because I can see, and I don't distract them all, don't tell the kids that, but the teachers will come let me know if they looked up something that was inappropriate. And I had a 1st grader come in, and it's nice to have those tools in school, right? Where all I had to say was, I can see what you're looking at on your computer. And he went straight into tears. And I was like, so that wasn't school appropriate. What are we gonna do? Let's talk about this, let's figure it out. And I think that's something that we need to educate parents on too. Is that there are tools that are free, and some of them are provided by the school that is giving some of that, but then also getting kids to understand how do we engage in that technology in a way that is more community building rather than kind of relationship damaging. Yeah. Yeah.
So the pandemic created 2 years of lost learning, and that hit the lower socioeconomic folks way harder than people at the upper end.
Yeah.
How do we catch those kids up, or can we catch those kids up?
So, I mean, I think, yes, we can. I think kids are amazing. And I think sometimes I think this is true probably in any field, but I think sometimes we give ourselves as adults too much credit in what it takes to help a kid kind of grow and what they need to learn. Kids can learn and progress at such an amazing level if we can engage them in it, right? I think some of that also, though, is providing those opportunities outside of school to add to it, both in summer programming and after school programming, but then it's capturing the right students into that, right? Like right now we're preparing for a summer school program that I voiced a lot of concerns when we started because we identified the top kids, but then we didn't provide the time because often our families that are the families we want to target are very busy and working in certain ways and access technology in a different way that they will register late for those things. And if the district doesn't slow down, or if we don't slow down as a school and really take the time to reach out and get to those correct families we're trying to capture, you're going to move down the tiers and end up with the families that don't need it as much, taking the slots that should go to those kids that need it. And that's something that I'm seeing happen again this year in summer, not totally, but seeing happen. And I just have had some emails back and forth frustrated about that process because I voiced it early. So I think that's a piece of it, right? Is thinking about how do we intentionally target the right families and get the right families in support, and then also get the right people in front of them. It can't be then having a summer school program or having an after school program that is then somebody that isn't necessarily educated in how to teach or how to support in the area that we're trying to close the gap on. And so that's why, like, for instance, with our SUN program next year, I just had a meeting with our SUN coordinator trying to think through how do I help support financially getting more of our teachers, but not teachers the same teacher to do it every day because I also want to keep the sanity of our teachers and keep them not wanting to leave. But how do I create an opportunity where every day after school, one of our teachers will be at the after school program doing some academic enrichment, right? Some academic pushing that then I can help fund that because I know Sun doesn't have the funds to do that. So I think that's a big piece of it. And I think, again, the other part is how do we also help families have tools to extend some of that learning at home? Because I think what mitigated the learning losses for our families for any of our families were the families that had ways to create academic connections while they weren't at school, right? Like understanding how do I within my day look at where there are math opportunities and build that? How do I know what my kids should be learning at this grade level and what are the connections to my everyday life? So those are some things we're also trying to do. But then the challenge again is something we've been doing a lot of is when we do, and I think this was a positive that came out of the pandemic, is now when we do events, we try and record with a message and the information that we give as well to then share out with everybody to view at a later time. So that then when they can't come or capture that, we share out all of that information so that any family could do it. Or if it comes up in a conversation later, I can direct the family to it and say, hey, in addition to what I'm telling you right now, here's another thing that's all about math supports that we had earlier this year that you can go and check out too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
So we saw how destructive these 2 years have been to children across the board. Through the teachers union, do you ever see, unless there's some horrible virus that comes through, that this is ever done again, that we just recognize that we have to get these kids in school, we have to have one-on-one learning, they have to be with each other?
So do I think that will happen again? Like it's something else? Are you saying that?
Well, I hope nothing, but I'm saying, we saw that this is a destructive. Will it ever, do you ever see it ever coming back through your organization saying, okay, we'll do whatever we can to get kids back into school?
Yeah, I think we learned a lot from this past experience, right? And I think that especially at the lower grades, at the elementary school level, I think that there will be a lot less chance that they will pull kids out as much as they did. I think they will look more into opportunities if something like this, hopefully we don't ever have to deal with it. Now you got me thinking about it. Hopefully we would be at least in a place I would think, and most of us would advocate for, of where there would at least be a hybrid model where there are times for in-person and connection and community rather than a model where we went fully online at the elementary school level. I mean, it was heartbreaking to see, because we have pre-K at our school too, to go and see 3- and 4-year-olds supposed to be engaging in things online. And it's like, that's not what school is supposed to be. We need to figure out how we do this differently. So I don't think we will go back and repeat the exact same thing we did before. I think that would shift. I do think at the high school and maybe even middle school that they would still go more to that rate, but I think they might do it a little bit differently in targeting students that it wasn't effective for. Would be my hope and my thought. But I'm also not at that level, and partially by choice because I don't want that level. I like having a community that I can actually be with rather than the large scale, but I think we learned a lot from it. I don't think we would exactly repeat what we did. Yeah.
Kaveh, this has got to be incredibly hard on your faculty and staff. How do they take care of themselves in the midst of all this and keep going and rejuvenating themselves? They got to be exhausted.
Yeah, and I think that's something else that I really appreciated from you all. I don't know if all of you know, but you guys did a lot to help kind of provide opportunities for appreciation. So I think those appreciations mean a lot because I think that keeps you going and reminds people that people are noticing that their job is super hard and that they're working really hard. I was sharing with Chris, our school is, I don't know if it's unique, but there's a capacity of it where we didn't have a lot of teachers that stepped away for most of our leaves were based on other things. And most of our teachers, we have many teachers that could retire and have chosen not to retire because they didn't want to leave during this time. They wanted to push through and get to a time where they feel good leaving the community in a place. And so we have teachers that are like well into their 70s, still teaching and doing it well, and not wanting to step in that. But at the same time, I think I try really hard to acknowledge and provide opportunities and honor the boundaries of what they have. Like that's where I say I'm not ever trying to ask a teacher to come and do an after school program or trying to push them into those things because we need to have those boundaries and that separation. And then also I think it's thinking through how do we support each other. So we do a lot at our school of trying to get staff together and build relationships outside of the capacity of work too, so that there's an opportunity to kind of like vent with each other, process through some of the real trauma that you go through some of these pieces. Because I think similar to other fields that can be a little bit stressful or traumatic, it's not helpful sometimes to process with people that don't understand what you're dealing with every day. So when you can create the space to process with each other, it allows for the mental health to be able to kind of be healed and come back. Like I go home and I tell my wife, like, it was a good day, whatever, it's cool. Like I'm just gonna move on because I don't need to rehash it with her when then I'm gonna have to explain a lot and do that. So I make sure I also get that time with my teachers, with other principals, just to be able to process through that, so then I don't bring that home. So I think that's the bigger piece too, right? We need them in a space to still be good for their families, because that part is a component that keeps them good for our kids. So I think it's a balance, and it's not something that's super easy. And I think we learned a lot from it, but I do think the community that's built within our school is a big piece of kind of continuing it through, and then having organizations that help support and show that appreciation. Because unfortunately, the district doesn't allow for me to spend a lot of money on teachers. And so it's helpful when other organizations, PTAs, Rotaries, those things are able to come in and do some things that show that appreciation, so that then teachers can feel that and know like they're not alone in that struggle, and that people recognize it was a pretty crazy hard year. So. Yeah.
We contributed in the past to food pantry and that kind of thing, and some equipment and all. And do you have other things that you would suggest that the teacher recognition and appreciation, that you praise that? Are there other things that you can think of? I know you mentioned at the beginning about the dance program, and possibly we could participate in that too. Are there other substantive things that you can think of, where a few $1,000 or a grant of some kind might make a difference for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we jump in, I think one of the things that we really want to do, I'm trying to get better at delegating. And so as we build for next year, I really worked on getting intentional teams created. And one of them was, when I talked about project-based learning, is trying to get a team that's focused on our STEAM, our science, technology, engineering, arts, math coalition, trying to think through where are the opportunities for growing what the curriculum is, because the curriculum can often be very dry, right? It can be something that kids aren't super drawn into. How do we have a committee looking at where are some opportunities for bringing in some technology or some art opportunities, different pieces that can come in? A lot of that often takes supplies, right? Or takes some sort of a capital investment in the beginning, so you have that to be able to draw from. So this summer we have that STEAM committee is kind of working on getting our STEAM lab kind of gone through, organized, and figuring out where we need it, and then looking at each of the grade levels around where are some opportunities for some technology or for some supplies that could build upon what's happening within that, to make it more enriching and fun. I think that's going to be an opportunity potentially to where I can reach out and say, hey, this is something we're thinking about. Is this something you guys would be willing to help and support in? And then it would be something that would then stay with the program, that then could be used from year to year within. And that's what we're trying to kind of get aligned in. We had a storybook parade on May 20th where we took all our kids, and we do it every year, but they've been shut down the past couple of years, where all the kids through the course, the last quarter of the year, they focus on a book that they read, and the whole grade level creates costumes and different things to go out, and we do a parade down Mississippi and then through the neighborhood and come back to the school. And that's another one that's a ton of fun, but it also takes getting all the supplies and figuring that out each year. So I think, and that's a part of our STEAM piece, right? So I think those kinds of pieces are ones that would be super helpful and are like a tangible piece that we would be able to see immediate results and would impact kids and teachers directly. Yeah.
But just a quick question, are cell phones allowed in the school?
So our rule, I'm going to speak to elementary school, because I think middle and high school have different rules. Our rule at our school is kids often bring cell phones to school. If I do not ever see it, I'm not going to question you on whether or not you have a cell phone. If your cell phone is seen, it is collected by me or a teacher, and it would be in your best interest to just check it in with the teacher or the person beforehand. Because if I see it out as a distraction, often at recess, even when it's hot, I bring a coat with multiple pockets so that I can just fill them up and remember where I got them all, and then take them back to my office and get them back to the parent at the end of the day, or to the kid if you ride to the bus home at the end of the day. Because the challenge is often that's what the kid carries that, so that then when they get home, they can call their parent at work and say, I'm home now. So that they know. So there is a piece of understanding that it is important for families, and also cell phones for adults and kids is an extension of yourself. So it's a really hard thing often for kids to give up. But if you can build that relationship, often I'll have kids that just come and drop it in the office because they don't want to leave with the teacher because they're worried about it. But the rule is that it's off and away, or it's checked in with the staff so that it doesn't become a distraction. Now, again, I said I collect them all day long, so it doesn't always follow that.
Do you know who's full of who?
Yep, usually I'll try and have some Post-its, but when I go to recess, that's why I have the different pockets. And then when I get in, I label them all and stick them on my desk till the end of the day.
Anything else? Well, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.